tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai piki mai ki tēnei kaupapa nui, te kaupapa o te mana o te wahine. E te tīmatanga o tēnei wānanga, he karakia. Karanga, karanga, te whare e tū nei. Karanga, karanga, te papa e tā koto nei. Rāranga hia mai te ira atua, rāranga hia mai tua wahine. Ko hene ahoa ne, ko hene tītama, ko hene rauwharangi, ko hene te iwa iwa, ko he nātore, ko au e tū nei, ueha, tau mai te mauri, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e.
Kia ora, Joanne. Tēnā koutou katoa. It is my genuine pleasure to be welcoming you as you join us here at Tāpoi Atawhai, Auckland City Mission, with both myself and Joanne Reedy. We'll begin formally introducing ourselves, and then we'll come over into the major kind of discourse or portion of today. Really is genuinely lovely to be with you. Ko piripiri te maunga, ko waitohi te awa, ko tukumaru te waka. Ki te taha o tuku mātua o te atiawa o waka ao Māui tuku iwi. Ki te taha o tuku whaia ko te oropi ona iwi. Ko ahau te manutaki o te Tāpoi Atawhai, ko Helen Robinson tōku ingoa. You'll hear that my name is Helen Robinson and I am the Manutaki or the Auckland City Missioner here at the Auckland City Mission. And you will have heard through what I've just spoken about is that I come from a rich whakapaparan lineage. Through my father, I whakapapa to Te Atiawa Waka a Māui at the top of the South Island, and have a rich European heritage, particularly a deep Irish one. It is my pleasure and honour to be with you here this morning as we gather to talk about the resiliency of women, and particularly the resiliency of women who suffer deeply. I'll hand over to you, Joanne.
Tēnā koe Helen, tēnei te mihi anō kia koutou katoa I tēnei wā. Ko wai ahau, ko moi hau te maunga, ko wai hau te awa, ko nā te tamatirā, ko nā te hako, ko nā te raukua nā iwi. Ko nā te kiriwere te hapu, ko pai o haere ki te marae, ko maratuhu te tangata, ko tainui te waka. Ko Joanne Reedy tōku ingoa e noho anau I tēnei wā I a Tamaki Makaurau. Ko au te kaiwhakahaere mātua o te Tāpoi Atawhai. Nō reira, wonderful to be here. How exciting to be invited to have a kōrero about this awesome kaupapa. And as I said, I hail from the Coromandel, Pairua, Waihi, Thames area, and I've been living in Auckland for a very long time, and just super excited to get on with this kaupapa.
Both of us actually are really excited to be here today, and you will be seeing on your screen a third person, Ellen Lear. Ellen, I don't know if you want to turn your camera on for a moment. Ellen is our comms leader here at the Auckland City Mission, because, kia ora, Ellen. Thank you for being here with us this morning and making this all work. It's lovely to have you here too. This is a webinar feature, so what that means, just in case that you're unsure about, is that you get to see us, but we don't get to see you. So this just enables as a way of using Zoom and a presentation function. So because of that, I'd really like to encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat function, and a little bit about yourself, perhaps what brings you here to this webinar this morning, and particularly as we go through and talk in the next half an hour or 40 minutes, we're really interested today in opening up that conversation about what is it that makes women resilient? What is it that enables us to do that supports us to do that? What do we need to be resilient? So if you'd be willing in the chat function to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and a little bit about what you believe the resiliency of women is all about. Many of you who are on the webinar this morning know the mission well, and many of you are brand new to us. So what is important is that I just give you a very, very brief sense of the woman that we see here on a daily basis, so that just provides a bit of a context or a platform for what we're talking about. So the Auckland City Mission is 101 years old. So in June of this year, we actually turn 102. We were founded by an extraordinary man called Jasper Calder, who was part of the Anglican Church and actually based at St. Matt's here in central city Auckland, right next door to home ground where the mission is now based. And he was driven by a deep internal call to respond to the reality of desperation that he saw in Tamaki Makaurau. Now, with a deep sadness or irony, perhaps, the Auckland City Mission was actually founded in a pandemic. The Spanish flu at the time was really pushing Jasper to respond. So that call of being with and responding to the reality of desperation in our city is the river or the awa, the Wairoa, that has held us strong through the last 100 years. And over time, the face of that desperation has shifted in Auckland. And currently, we're located really in 3 different areas of our work. The first responds to people who are suffering the reality of food insecurity, so who don't have enough access, money to access good kai for themselves and their whānau each week. And this particularly is a reality that women suffer. And I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about food insecurity today, so I won't go into it, but it's important at this stage, it's important to note that that is a huge piece of work that the mission does. In the last financial year, we distributed with our partners over 50,000 food parcels, and every one of those food parcels goes to a family in Tamaki, and that would feed a family of 4 for 3 meals for 4 days. So that just gives you a sense that there is literally hundreds of thousands of people in Auckland today who don't have access to enough good kai. The second piece of work we do relates to access to healthcare. So we have a primary healthcare centre here called the Calder Centre, named after Jasper Calder, of course, and it's a small but very important primary healthcare centre located in home ground here in central city Auckland. Has an enrolment of just under 2,000 people, and many people who are part of that Calder Centre suffer deeply, actually, people who are experiencing homelessness, very vulnerably housed, and is also open to anyone here in Auckland as well. The third piece of our work that the mission is known well for is our response to people who are experiencing homelessness. So this is people who are rough sleeping, who are in emergency housing. We provide 2 transitional housing services here at James Liston Hostel and Te Whare Hina Tori that I know Joanne is going to be talking a little bit about today. We have a service called Street to Home, which provides outreach. So we literally go to the streets and we are supporting people through them in emergency housing and to access permanent housing. And then, of course, supporting people in that permanent housing. And part of the gift of our brand new building here at Home Ground is that we also are able now to provide 80 permanent homes ourselves in this dwelling here. So we're really responding to the needs of people across that spectrum. One of the things, certainly in my 9 years here at the mission, that I have become clearer and clearer about is that the dominant discourse, sadly, in terms of in the preparation or the provision of services for people who are experiencing food insecurity or homelessness, by and large, we have a history of a whakapapa of those services being designed by men for men, often quite unconsciously, I'd have to acknowledge. And that in our journey here at the mission, wherever I cast my eyes or our gaze rests, what we have come to understand, particularly in recent years, is that the reality of women is specific and particular, and often it differs quite significantly from the reality of men who also suffer deeply. So our response to be appropriate to and and dignified and kind of best practice in the longing to really respond to the needs of women is that we are more and more becoming clearer that actually what women need is something particular and different, and that the heart of that actually calls us deeply to a listening journey that actually says what is the reality of women who are suffering across Auckland, what is the nature and the face of that desperation, and in response to that, how can we not only stand with people and provide a very genuine sense of solidarity in there, it is also how can we design services that best meet those people's needs, and critically, how can we advocate for structural change that means that this will not continue. So those are incredibly important questions that are sitting with us always. A number of years ago, we did a study here at the Mission looking into the reality and to the experiences of people who are suffering food insecurity. Now, food insecurity essentially is the phrase that we use to say people don't have access to enough good kai every day to feed their family and themselves. And that lack of access actually, and which is often usually about a lack of income, is about what drives that insecurity. So people are not only hungry, but they are malnourished, and also deeply experiencing the suffering that comes with the stress of not knowing where the next meal is going to come from, particularly if you are a parent and in most instances a mother seeking to raise her whānau and to feed people. So one of the questions that we did in this piece of research was actually ask people not only what are their experiences, but what are their hopes and dreams in response in the reality that they are experiencing. And we actually last year published an article which gave our findings in response to that question. And Ellen, you can find that on our website, and we can post it out to you if you're interested. It's now been published in the New Zealand journal called Tuitui. What was incredibly profound for us, oh, and a shout out to the key authors of that, to Caitlin York Kearns, to Alice Nichols, to Kelsey Dean. There were a number of us, there were a number of us who were actually part of putting that article together, but those three really led the charge, so I do want to acknowledge them, is that what we found is in the midst of suffering, and I do need to just put a kind of bit of a picture on this for you, is that we're saying across Auckland today, we believe that 20% of Auckland at least does not have access to enough good kai. So that's hundreds of thousands of people. Now, overwhelmingly, the majority of people who are suffering are women and women raising families or children alone. Now, that structurally is really, really important, because what we're actually seeing is women who are needing to parent and wanting to parent, and particularly if they are raising children in a single parent family, that they are significantly economically deprived because of that reality and that reality alone. Now, when I really sit with this, it makes me extraordinarily angry, because on a big, big structural system, what we're actually doing is penalising or judging or condemning, if I could even use that word, women who choose to raise children alone to a reality of being financially insecure, and then the very clear result of that is food insecure, and then the impact of that is that themselves and their children every day do not have access to enough good kai. So this calls us across our country, and certainly particularly as women, to call for change, and particularly to acknowledge the critical role and contribution of women who are parenting. So in that context, if you can imagine what it is like, or just begin perhaps listening, you are someone who is food insecure or have been in your life. Perhaps someone listening here is someone who has been raised by a single mother as well. is that in that context, we asked people what their goals and their dreams were, what their aspirations were. And I'm just going to read a couple of sentences from this article because it says it a lot better than what I could. The research demonstrates that ambition and hope persists for many food insecure people, despite the structural oppression that perpetuates material deprivation, which is a lot more sophisticated way of just saying what I've just said. What's critical to this, though, is the finding that in the midst of that suffering, that ambition and hope persists. Now, that hope is often about a longing for better financial circumstances, for a home, a longing to be good role models, a longing to complete further study, a longing to live in better circumstances and to create that for their children, both now and into the future. And what deeply moves me is that we've, and literally now have the evidence to prove, certainly what I've experienced in most of my time and listening to people deeply, is that in the midst of extraordinary suffering, hope is maintained. And it is that hope, or that I believe is at the core of the resiliency of the response to women who suffer. And certainly then becomes a deep question within me and everyone who works across Te Tāpui Atawhai, how can we build and support the ability for all women, and particularly women who are suffering, to maintain hope and to dream and work towards the reality of that dream being made real. And what that really does do in a much bigger picture is cause us to really change the discourse or the narrative around what is going. So we will often have heard about a cycle of poverty or a cycle of deprivation that people and women experience, and that certainly is true. But there is an and the and that my experience has taught me, that what this research found, is that there is also a cycle of hope, of legacies of hope, of women who dream deeply for their reality to be different, and particularly for the reality of their children to be different. And that longing, then appropriately supported, means that women can begin to look at ways, and we can find ways to support women to change that reality. Now, none of that takes away from an acknowledgement that is really, really crystal clear that I do want to get across today, that it is the structural injustice, it is that deeper oppression that really drives the experience. So things occur structurally and we experience them individually. The lack of acknowledgement of the role, of the importance of parenting and the contribution of that, means that women suffer financially. That's the structural kind of tenet that we are called to change and to challenge. In the midst of that, however, what we find and what we hear is that longing or that hope for a better reality is the ticket. It's the ticket out, it's the ticket to surviving. And I really, really want to acknowledge and affirm that today, particularly when we are talking about women who suffer that reality of food insecurity. Joanne is going to talk to us, I think, a little bit about the reality of women who are suffering homelessness and the resiliency in the face of that. And I'll now hand over to her.
Mauri ora kia koutou. Kia riri anō ngā tai o mihi kia koutou katoa e ngā maunga whakahi e ngā awa whakatiri tanewha o te motu e ngā marei kore e noho nei a tēnā rā koutou katoa. It is also a great honour that I get to speak alongside Helen on a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about. And my kōrero begins about nearly 3 years ago, when with much excitement, hope and a sprinkling of naivety, I arrived at the mission with a plan to metaphorically birth into being a kaupapa Māori trauma-informed service for wahine who were experiencing homelessness or rough sleeping. It has been an absolute privilege to be one of a group of courageous and inspiring women in such an important endeavour. So we began with the necessity of sourcing a name that would represent and uphold the mana of all who resides within her, and we went searching for a beacon of hope. During our search and speaking with Kaumatu and Kuia, a pūrākau was shared, which is a story that exists in the history of the Māori world, and it spoke of a time thousands of years ago when the world was shrouded in darkness and a light appeared, which guided the children of Papatūānuku, the Earth Mother, and Ranginui, the Sky Father, into that a realm of light where exists knowledge, enlightenment, hope, and opportunity. Her name is Hinātori. She is the fourth child of Wainui and Tangotango, belonging to Te Whānau Marama, the family of light. Her siblings are the sun, the moon, and other light variations. And we claimed her and all she represented. We named our service Te Whare Hinātori, the House of Hinātori, the House of Light. What was important to us within Te Whare Hinātori was that we created a space by wahine, for wahine, that embodied Māori values, and that was a space that it was all times safe, secure, and consistent. When we opened our doors, the wahine arrived, exhibiting poverty of wairua, disconnected from their whenua, from their whānau, from their tamariki, from no money, poor health physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. They were existing on the fringes of our society, and all of them, without exception, had experienced a lifetime of traumatic experiences, where their journey has been one of survival, which has left many of them bereft and undeniably exhausted. And what we understand about trauma is that it continues to embody and live in wahine and can manifest in so many different ways, like crime, addiction, mental, physical ill health, disconnection, and homelessness. So we developed and organised a smorgasbord of ideas, a program, a structure, therapeutic groups, AOD groups, occupational therapy, support, one-on-one psychotherapy, waiata, karakia, arts, parenting groups, which we were going to implement to support these wahine. And what we quickly realised is that these were going to be incredibly useful tools and experiences and would provide containment and structure. And what they were really yearning for and what they really wanted, and what many of them have never received, was human connection, kindness, and care that could be trusted. So much like the pūrākau of Hinātori, I think the stories of our wahine will speak more for themselves. So from a wahine who slept on a hard floor with no mattress or covering for such a long period of time, that when she arrived and was given a bed, she felt more comfortable and safer continuing to sleep on the floor. Her eventual ability to sleep in the bed appeared to mirror her increase in feeling safe in her environment, having faith and belief that the staff's ability to care could be trusted. A wahine whose desire it was to have her children return to her care. However, her daily use of drugs continued to draw her back into dark spaces. Every time she would leave the whare, our hearts would sink, knowing she was going to use, and not knowing when or if she would return. Every time she left, the team always maintained contact. They texted, they called, and it never mattered whether she responded. They never judged. And every time she returned from a period of hard using, looking physically and emotionally spent, she was welcomed into the whare as if she had never left. Every day is considered a new day and a new opportunity. Eventually, this wahine did end up leaving our service as her pull towards drugs was such a difficult moment-by-moment struggle for her. The team, however, continued to maintain contact, and much later, to our surprise and delight, she rang our doorbell and let us know she was pregnant, she needed a home, and she was ready. The months ahead of her were difficult, many ups and downs, but the team and the wahine refused to give up, and she slowly began to shift. She slowly began to hold her head up. She slowly began to smile, and the hope returned in her eyes, evidenced by a sparkle. She eventually went on to attend rehab, and she graduated. She had a healthy babies in her care, and importantly, she is managing to navigate her life in a way that is true to her. Or another wahine who admitted herself in order to escape an abusive living situation where she felt using meth was the only way she could manage. Abuse, violence, addiction was an accepted and expected part of her early life. She experienced significant abuse from an early age, entering a number of violent relationships from adolescence and being in active addiction her entire adult life. She had attempted to abstain from using drugs and alcohol by attending a number of different rehab programs, however, usually relapsed within a few weeks. Following a period of unwellness, she was diagnosed with a potentially life-threatening heart disorder requiring open heart surgery. She was unable to have the surgery if she did not have a safe and stable home environment. So she arrived at Te Wharehina Tori with significant health issues. She was in early recovery from addiction to alcohol and other drugs and presenting with anxiety, depression, grief, and underlying anger. She engaged really well with all the program offerings throughout the duration of her stay. But during a routine test at the hospital in preparation for her heart surgery, she received news that she had breast cancer and required a mastectomy. At this point, she began discussing funeral arrangements and packed up her belongings just in case she didn't make it through the surgery. She was admitted to hospital for heart surgery with an expected stay of 2 weeks and a light recovery back at Te Wharehina Tori. However, due to complications, she required 3 surgeries, twice weekly blood tests, admitted to hospital 2 more times. During this time, she reported a significant deterioration in her physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being. But she also said that residing in a safe living environment at Te Wharehina Tori was the only reason she was able to proceed with this treatment. And her gratitude for this is what motivated her to continue to engage in the program. I can report that her heart is strong. She came through the mastectomy with no complications. She now resides with her youngest child in a whare, in a familiar neighbourhood near other wahine in recovery, whom she met while residing at Te Wharehina Tori. So recently she returned to the whare to share graduation with some of our wahine who are current residents and to support and inspire them through sharing her own personal story with them. I was speaking with a few colleagues the other day about their professional careers and whether there was a day, time, and person they remembered in their history that believed in their potential so much that they had no choice but to believe in it themselves, and that this changed the trajectory of their lives. Without fail, all of us remembered distinctly how old we were, who the person was, and most importantly, how it felt. The age that this occurred for all of us differed, but our experience was exactly the same. This, I believe, mirrors why Te Wharehina Tori is changing women's lives, that staff believe and speak to the light, the Hina Tori within each of the wahine that enter our service. They believe and speak to their potential. They name their potential and support to bring their potential into being. I believe that every woman, every wahine, deserves someone to believe in them. These amazing wahine that have entered our whare have taught us more than we knew was possible. That for all the extensive trauma they've experienced, all the barriers they've had to overcome throughout their lives, their courage, tenacity, dreams, and willingness to fight has been inspiring. My team are incredible women celebrating incredible women. And my hope is that all wahine, all women, are made to feel incredible. Nō reira koutou mā, he wahine, he whenua, ka ora ai te iwi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
I think the deep sigh and joy and delight in me in this moment is that on one level, I know all the stuff that Joanne has just spoken about. And even for someone who knows, it is extraordinarily powerful and moving, Joanne, for you to share what you have and to particularly ground what you have spoken in the stories of women who have survived and then with support thrived. And it's amazing how these things for me go so quickly, and I'm conscious that we're already at 11:30, so we have another 10-15 minutes left today. So I do want to open up the floor to questions. Joanne and I will keep talking just while those questions roll in, but if there is anything particularly you do want to acknowledge, and just a bit of a shout out too, if you haven't introduced yourself, it's extraordinary looking in the chat who is here today, and please just keep talking to us through that chat function. One of the things, Joanne, that moved me about what you said that really deeply resonates with me is that every one of us, particularly in the face of significant suffering and oppression, needs help and needs specific grounded help. So Joanne talked about some very clear stories of someone who needed a safety and a home so that she could have her medical care attended to, someone who needed belief that a life beyond addiction was possible, and in so doing actually birthed a child into a new possibility and a new dream and a new reality. Someone who needed a specific place and help so that she could learn that she was worthy of a bed, and all that that meant. And similarly, when I talk about people who are suffering the reality of food insecurity, two things need to happen. People need kai in a very, very specific moment. Nothing can be achieved when people are hungry. And then we also need an opportunity for someone to listen to us and then work in the context of our realities to see how we can create a way out. So there is a call to action, and I think when Joanne ended her kōrero talking about this in a particularly a professional context, is how can we, as men, as women, support other women, and then particularly women who are suffering, to claim that light or that sense of hina tori within them, so that the reality of a life that is better is made possible, so that it stops just being a dream and starts to become a reality. Now, we have very, very, very special services like Te Whare Hina Tori that at the mission we are wildly proud of and deeply protective of. And I do want to recognise that across in our day-to-day lives, I have an undoubtedly that every one of us will come across another woman in one role or another, either as a colleague, either as part of a school community, as part of a church community, as part of a marae community, anywhere that the face of suffering is present, and that we may be in a position to literally reach out a hand and to begin to be in conversation. Now, that challenge, and particularly the challenge that is laid out for those who are suffering, is that we know that it begins in relationship with people. To genuinely know and understand a reality of someone, and to be particular and specific in the support of that individual, we need someone to be in relationship with us, and we need to be in relationship with them. And I certainly want to acknowledge that the nature of our humanity shows us that for all of us at some point in our life, we have the ability both to give a hand and we need a hand. Now, that is even for women who are deeply resourced and supported in all the important aspects of our lives. So there is a real challenge, I think, that comes out of the conversation for today to open one's eyes and to actually see who are the people in front of us and who particularly are the women in front of us, and to come to understand and to be in relationship with those individuals. Now, I suspect that many of you who are online today are probably already doing that. The fact that you've rocked up to this is showing that you're particularly interested. And so I want to acknowledge you and shout out to you. Without knowing many of you, I suspect, and some of you I do know, so I can say that you are women who are that hand for another woman. And that hand doesn't have to be forever. And that hand is critical to changing the life course of someone. There is also a time to have a discourse around a much bigger structural reality, and it's important that we acknowledge that structural reality in this conversation today. Part of Te Tāpui Atawhai, our very kind of foundation, is laid not only in responding to that face of desperation, but daring to ask the question why. Now, when you come back from a really, really, really big picture, it is crystal clear that the status of women is not equitable to the status of men, and particularly when we put a financial lens on that. So access to power and access to resource are critical determinants of understanding equity and power. So there is a grand encouragement within me to every woman on the call, if this is part of your life, to take up those positions of power, to claim that resource, and in doing so become conscious of other people, and particularly other women who are around you, to see if there is a way that we can change or shift the structures so that women after us would not be continuing with the structural oppression that many women, and particularly many of women who come to Te Tāpui Atawhai, suffer. There is implicit in that a real challenge around some particular issues. So I am horrified at the gender pay gap that exists within our country. And I am horrified that it is Māori and Pacific women who suffer that more than anybody else in our country. What is it then that we can do in our workplaces and in response to government policy that actually puts that on the table? And what is it that we can do to support organisations and bodies that are attempting to take this cause up on our collective behalf? So I know there is the gender equality legislation is a really, really good example. What is it that we can be doing to support that and to even use or enact that if that's appropriate in our communities? There is some deep questions I know that we certainly ask here at the mission around the financial of wanting to support women, and particularly women who are raising children alone, so that they can do that on adequate income. And for us here at the mission, that is a crystal clear call for the living wage for every individual, and then also for benefit levels to be raised. There are a couple of questions that are coming through, and I do want to address those, and Joanne, you may jump in at any point if you want to address them well. So the first question we've asked is, how are we planning to help as many women as possible? Part of the reality of my role, and I dare to even claim to speak for Joanne in a moment, is that it is very hard to not get overwhelmed by those who we are not helping. And I have to be located in the reality or the truth of what we are doing. And then I think, particular to this question, constantly asking myself, what is it that I and we can be doing to be both improving the quality of the services to women and, where necessary, increasing those. It gets to be some really tricky questions for us, however, well, for all of us, because it's often around resourcing. So when you look at the reality of somewhere like Te Whare Hinatori, there are 16, 17 women there. I would love a reality where we have 3 or 4, if I dare to put that into the universe, and so that we can have not 15 or 16 at any one time, raukura or women that we are supporting, but actually 50 or 60 at any one time. To do that takes incredible resource, both in terms of people and in terms of the money, and even for us as an organisation. Te Whare Hinatori was started about 2.5 years ago, and it's one of the most incredible things that I am proud of here at the mission, and it's been really, really hard. All kinds of doors have had to be unlocked. So it's a really good question, I think, for all of us that actually say, how can we unlock that support so that services like Te Whare Hinatori, also that services like the response to food and the social work support around people who are suffering can be increased as well. Joanne, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And what sits with me is, what Helen's talking about, the limited resourcing. And I don't know if you'd ever have enough resourcing to be able to achieve to meet all the need that's out there. Some of the things, the ways in which we are addressing that, though, is that Te Whare Hinatori has a staged process whereby you can come in as a tainer, so you're new to the place, you're getting to know how it works. you sort of move to a tōkana position where you're taking on a little bit more responsibility before you head into a marae kura role where you're giving back. And I think that's part of our koha and wero to our wahine when they leave is pay it forward. And I think that's the same for all of us. Whether it's really small, whether it's a really large amount of support that you give somebody, it doesn't matter. It's the point is that we're doing it. And how I like to think about it is that sort of analogy around the mosquito. If you've ever, mosquito is really small, but if you've ever been in a room trying to sleep with one, it's almost impossible. So we go out and we be mosquitoes for everybody, and just sort of spread the care and the love in that way. And that would be my response.
Joanne, I'm going to leave here today thinking about mosquitoes. There is a very similar kind of analogy, a slightly different construct, but I think speaks to that truth about some of the bigger structural drivers too. Someone once said to me that all it takes to derail a train is a pebble on a train track. And in much the same analogy to being a mosquito in the lives of people is that I long for us to be that pebble on that train track. So how can we be strategic and clever and maximise the power that we have to derail a system that ensures that people are suffering? The reality of the systems that we have, like we're constructing them, it really does not have to be the way that it is. And so it then calls us to action. And I think there are, another question that we've received here is what are the practical actions that people can take? And there are multiple, depending on your context, I think, and the time, energy, skills, willingness, ability that you have to respond. But wherever you are, you can. And I really, really think that is about being in relationship with people. So is there someone in your workplace that actually really could appreciate a genuine ear and a friendship? Is there someone in your church? Is there someone at the marae? Is there someone in your school? Is there a young woman who would just love to be taken out to lunch and told that she's doing pretty well? Is there someone somewhat down the career ladder from you that could actually just do with a bit of mentoring and coaching to enable them to lift up? Is there a place for you? Are you in a position to donate kai? Are you in a position to donate money to organisations like us, but much bigger than the mission as well? Are you in a position to get really involved in some of that bigger structural stuff? So the gender equality conversations that are happening at government level. And are you in a position where you're determining someone's salaries? Are you doing a gender analysis around that? So there is a myriad of really practical options. One of the questions here has been asked about how do we volunteer at Te Whare Hina Tori, and probably the best way to do that afterwards is to go to the mission website, and you'll see that there is a volunteer application page, and we're genuinely keen to provide opportunities and support people to contribute, because the mission in the end is actually just an opportunity for all of us, and particularly all of us here in Auckland, to stand with those who are suffering and to be the face of the response to that desperation. So the kōrero today has been located really in two different places. One is around women who suffer homelessness, and one is around women who suffer the reality of food insecurity. Both Joanne and I in different ways have sought to ground that in some very particular stories and experiences. So Joanne has shared 2 or 3 stories of raukura who have literally been or part of Te Whare Hina Tori, and I referenced a piece of research that we did here at the mission where we asked women what their aspirations were, women who were suffering the reality of food insecurity. And what we have heard through both is that there is a light within each one of us, perhaps as human beings, certainly as women, that calls us in the midst of suffering to some extraordinary levels of resiliency and a disposition of hope hope for a better future for ourselves and hope for a better future for our children. And it is that hope and that sense of that hope that I do want to leave us with today, coupled with the sense that each one of us, even those who have very little resource and power, have extraordinary power to support another woman in our midst, and to do that in a small or a big way appropriate to our context. I want to acknowledge that one way that you've actually done that is by joining us for a morning here. I want to mihi to you, Joanne. It is an extraordinary privilege for me to be here with you and to listen and to learn from you. Thank you for being so generous. And I look forward to more and more and more of these with you. Do you want to say anything to wrap up, Joanne, before I just lead us in a karakia?
It's just been a privilege really to be part of this panel and to be invited on.
We're just losing your sound, Joanne. Oh, sorry, just say that a bit again. For some reason we lost your sound, but then you've come back.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
am I back?
go again.
Okay.
Yes, you're back.
I just wanted to say it's been really helpful for me, because often we get caught up in the work, and just to reground and reconnect to the passion of the why we are here, and to remember that we are changing people's lives. So kia ora, Helen.
Kia ora. No, thank you, Joanne. You can look at this, we've obviously recorded this, so you can look at this again. I think Ellen is going to post it on LinkedIn and on our website or Facebook here at the Mission. If any of you would like to reach out, just have conversations, we'd really look forward to having that. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and I'll just end in karakia. Thank you, and I think this karakia is done in acknowledgement of all the women that we have spoken today, the ones, particularly the ones who have suffered, and the ones who need us to be that hope for that moment. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhao tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tāpū, āke, 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 āmene. Mauri ora.